1. So this happened earlier in this year. As a little background, I am a 30-year-old male, married, 29 at the time, with a young daughter. I live in a rural northern California town, pretty much right in the epicenter of the gold rush. And I don't know if it's all the ways the land was taken or the ways people killed for wealth back then, but it's always seemed to have a higher share of strange recluses and sovereign citizen types. That being said, this is not a haunting story or strange people of the woods, but it was by far the most frightening encounter I've experienced as a father. Some time ago I ended up with an extra day off, and my wife and I decided to go for a drive and check out a semi-local gun show. From time to time I will get tables at them and have friends who do them regularly, so we went to visit them as I am always looking for obscure parts and pieces for old military weapons. And had some family that lived in the area of this show too. We had a hell of a winter last year, so unsurprisingly it was a cold, gloomy day. We drove about an hour and knew the promoters, so walked right in. As I was passing tables in search of the right stuff, I was carrying my daughter with me. She was very small and ridiculously cute, so everyone wanted to look and ask about her, which is normal from what I've observed for parents. At times you even draw a small crowd, usually of sweet, little old ladies, and some grandpa types. As a side point, I had one grumpy lady tell me she was way too young. I looked at her confused and said she's like 3 months old. She'll never remember. Back on topic. There was one man who seemed a bit more excited than most men his age, but he said that he had worked as an EMT in an NICU for years. So seemed reasonable that he was so happy to see healthy babies. As the afternoon went on, he passed me a few more times, moving against the crowd for a sign, and commented on how beautiful she was. As babies often do at that age, my wife needed to breastfeed our daughter. We went out to the car and had blinders in the back seat so she could have privacy and keep the baby from distractions. I turned on the heater, locked the doors, and went back in to help a buddy sell during a busier point. About 10 to 13 minutes later, my phone starts ringing, with my frantic wife on the other end. About 3 minutes before I had noticed that law enforcement had gotten up and walked outside of the show. It took a minute to calm her down, but apparently, the guy had followed us outside and been watching closely. My wife got the sudden feeling that makes your hair stand up whilst feeding in the car. That was when she saw a shadow standing outside her door, blocking it from opening, holding a small metal tube, Maglite. At that same moment, a sheriff pulled up, who had also seen us go to the car. The officer asked what was going on, and the man tried to say he was talking to my wife, who rolled the window down slightly and said she was not, and didn't want to either. The officer asked him his name, and when he turned around to run the name, he tried to scurry away. Name was a fake, hence why the other officers got up. Detained, he gave his real name, and within 1 minute of calling it in, the man was turned around and arrested. Turns out he had felony warrants for kidnappings. The man was waiting for nearby cars to leave. He was about to try and take my wife and infant daughter. And that cop not being right there, who knows how it would have unfolded. Luckily, there was a cop when we needed one. 2. My husband, son and I moved into government housing 7 years ago, after being on the list for 10 miserable years. We love our house. Since we moved in, though, we've had someone messing with us. The first thing that happened was that our power kept being turned off, a couple of times a night for a few months. Then I had 2 distinctive pieces of clothing go missing. I'm a goth. Pretty much my whole wardrobe is black. One of these items was a little grey and black striped t-shirt of an unusual shape, and the other, much harder to lose in an all-black wardrobe, was a hand-embroidered raspberry red dress. 2 years. They were gone. We came home one day, and they were laid out on our bed. In the meantime, a lot of strange stuff happened. Someone took to eating KFC among some pot plants in our backyard. We'd find the remnants. Someone took to leaving goth women's clothes around our washing line. The first time it had been very windy, and we thought it might have blown in from the neighbors. No. My underwear started vanishing from the washing line. Stuff would get moved around in our house. Things would go missing and reappear in super obviously high traffic areas they could not have possibly been. In one case, placed smack dab in the middle of a table that had been cleaned off entirely before we came home. Scariest was the way they seemed to be focused on my medication. I have severe hypertension. I can't miss my meds. My meds would get taken and reappear in bizarre places they couldn't have gotten to naturally. This went on for 4 years. We would have changed the locks, but we had been led to believe this was a breach of our tenancy. This wasn't true, but we didn't find out till much later. Finally, we came home one day and found a bloody handprint on our bathroom wall. That was it. I was planning to call the next day and ask if the landlord could change the locks. However, the next day, without prompting, they rang us and said they were changing the locks that week. We had not mentioned any of the problems to them, ever. Things settled for nearly a year, and then it started up again. Quietly at first. Just stuff moved around again. We started putting stuff up against access points at night. And it stopped as long as we remembered. If we slacked off, it would happen again. 6 months ago, weird shit started happening outside. One night someone knocked on our door, went to answer it, no one there. Thought nothing of it. Sat down with my back to the wall nearest to the front door. Bang! On the wall right behind me, and then all along the front wall, like someone hitting it as they ran away. But I wasn't quick enough to catch them. A week or two later, I was turning off the TV when I heard a man cough outside. Couldn't have been more than 3 feet from me. We're set back from the road. Stuff starts getting moved in the house again. My 2 favorite skirts vanished. They turned up a couple of weeks later, neatly folded, and hidden under things that hadn't been moved by us in nearly a year. The day before they reappeared, I went to use my phone, and it autofilled an address for me that I'd never ever heard of, let alone typed. It turned out to be a computer repair place, 1,000 kilometers away. The phone had never autofilled any address but mine before. There has been a slow but persistent increase in activity. In May, I was sitting up late at night, and I heard what I thought was a man singing sad folk music from the direction of my husband and I's bedroom. I kind of recognized the tune, but not quite, and then I thought I was mishearing my husband snoring. But I went to check, and the sound stopped. I thought it was just one of those things. The next day, we found out the hot water system was turned off overnight. The switch is outside our house, near the head of our bed. Last week, my son and I were talking about the fact that there was clearly a pattern. Something would be hidden in a ridiculous place. My phone would get screwed with. Usually I would open it up and find some strange internet page open. 3 days ago, our son's shoes vanished. He is 19 years old, with autism. He is super regulated and careful with his possessions. Always placed in the same places. It's a ritual he never varies from. We searched high and low. I opened my phone, went to look at Google Earth. The last thing the app was used for was to calculate a distance in Australia. The app was open to a remote location in Turkey. I keep a jar of crystallized ginger to deal with nausea. This morning I came out to find a piece of ginger had been taken out of the jar and neatly placed on top. 2 cups, both used, had been placed back in our cupboard. One had a shade of lipstick on it that was definitely not mine. I have no idea who is doing this. And as I said, I'm changing the locks again, as soon as we can afford. 3. For reference, I'm a 20-year-old male who weighs about 200 pounds and I'm 6 feet. I live in the suburban area of a very large city, which I won't disclose because if I did, it would make it extremely easy to figure out where I live. This experience happened to me about 2 weeks ago, so I'm still shaken up from it. I worked as a busboy on the weekend at a popular catering hall near where I lived. I had been working there for a little over a month at that point, and it was actually my last day working there, since I had another job that was offering me more hours with better pay, if I was available on weekends. I had to work a party that lasted from 7 p.m. up until midnight, and I had to stay for almost 2 hours after the party was over, to reset the room for the following morning. Around 2 o'clock in the morning we finished resetting the room, and were told we could leave. I was about to walk out of the building when my boss ran over to me and asked if I could help her move a table to the upstairs room real quick, which I did. We placed the table where it needed to go, and then we both went back downstairs to leave. We walked outside and said goodnight to each other, as she was getting inside an Uber car she had requested to take her home. Now, due to numerous setbacks in my life, I unfortunately do not have my driver's license yet. The catering hall is only about a 30 to 40 minute walk from my house, and I don't mind walking. But during my time working there, my parents were nice enough to drive me to and from work. My mom told me to call her when I got out of work, and she would give me a ride as she didn't want me walking home by myself that late at night. I gave her a call, and her phone immediately went to voicemail indicating that it was off. I tried again and the same thing happened. I thought to myself that she must have fallen asleep on the couch and forgot to put her phone on the charger. So it must have died. She does this very often at night. I called my dad hoping that his phone wasn't on silent, as it usually is when he goes to sleep. As luck would have it, it must have been since I called his phone a few times and got no answer. Shit, I thought to myself. All my co-workers had left, so I couldn't ask anyone I worked with for a ride home, and the only bus nearby that would cut my walking trip in half stops running at midnight, so I couldn't take the bus home. I also didn't call an Uber since I forgot my debit card, and only had 2 singles on me. Looks like I had to say fuck it, and walk home instead. To give some perspective, the catering hall was located in between a service road that runs along a major highway, and a street that rode along the coast side. In order to get home, I had to walk down the service road for about 10 miles, until it hit the aforementioned coastside road, which went underneath the highway and out onto the other side. Then I'd have to walk 2 more blocks up that road until it hits another street that I'd need to turn right on and walk for another 10 minutes, half of which is spent walking up a hill until I reached the street that entered the community I lived in. I began walking, and about 5 minutes later I pass a bar where I see a car idling in the parking lot, with only the left headlight shining. The car was a white Toyota Camry, if I'm not mistaken, and there were 2 guys in the car smoking a cigarette. I quickly glanced over while passing by, and didn't think much of what I had seen. The bar closed at 1 in the morning, but I figured they were just 2 guys driving somewhere who pulled into the parking lot for a quick smoke. I turned onto the road that runs underneath the highway, and was crossing the service road on the other side, when I get this sudden urge to look behind me. I quickly looked back to see that same car driving down the road I was walking along. It wasn't exactly pitch black, but it was still relatively dark enough at that point, where I might not have recognized the car if both headlights had been shining, instead of just the left headlight alone, shining in the darkness. I continue walking and eventually turn right onto the road with the hill I mentioned earlier, when they slowed down next to me and the passenger rolled down the window to talk to me. The road I turned onto was darker than the road I was walking on before, so I wasn't able to make out exactly what either of them looked like, but from what I could make out they were both probably in their late 20s, and were wearing dark clothing. The driver was a white male, while the passenger, on the other hand, was a black male. The passenger rolls down the window and asks what I'm doing walking so late at night. to which I respond that I'm walking home from work. He asked me, "Would you like us to give you a ride home?" I responded by saying, "That's very kind of you, but I'm fine walking home by myself. Thank you for the offer, though." He gets visibly annoyed, and in a somewhat agitated tone he said, "Nah, man, it's dark and dangerous outside. You should let us drive you. We'll get you home safe and sound. Come on, you can trust us." At this point, the road was empty except for this car, containing the two men and I. I had a bad feeling in my gut, telling me to get away from these men. I decline once again and dart behind the car and walk across the street. I walk up and turn left into a parking lot, a different community about 2 blocks from my own that had a chain in front of it, preventing people without the proper key from parking inside the lot. All of a sudden, the driver rolls down his window and screams, "Get the fuck back here, you fucking bitch!" He flips a U-turn and pulls up to the entrance of the parking lot, and the passenger jumps out and begins chasing me. The driver peels off, presumably to get to the road on the other side to ambush me. My adrenaline immediately hits me, and I begin sprinting away from this crazy man. He yells, "We're gonna give you a ride! Stop running away from us!" I looked back, and we had a bit of distance between us. He looked somewhat chubby and probably wasn't expecting me to be able to run so fast, since I'm slightly overweight myself. I turn right onto the road and continue sprinting until I hear a car squeal down the road behind me. I look back and see a single headlight in the distance, speeding down the road, and the man chasing after me, starting to gain on me. I start freaking out, and run and turn left onto the next road I reached, and began making a break for the park, since the area of the park I was running toward was dark and thick with trees, so I figured I could lose them in there. As I ran into the park, struggling to continue sprinting as I was losing my breath, I looked back to see the car turn onto the road. The driver stops the car and yells at his friend, "Get back in the car! The cops hang out back there, and they might see us. Leave him, we're getting out of here." The man chasing me then stops and runs back towards the car. He flings the door open and jumps in the car. As soon as he slams the door shut, the driver flips a U-turn and speeds off, turns right onto the road up ahead, and disappeared. The park is extremely large, and I remember my parents talking about a good number of drug deals taking place in the park, and the police were starting to send officers to patrol that area at night to bust up any drug deals they witness, and that must have spooked my pursuers. I jogged quickly into the park and hid in the darkness underneath the trees for about 20 minutes, just to be sure they were definitely gone, and to try and calm myself down as much as I could. Afterwards, I walked through the park towards the exit into my community, with my senses on hyper alert, to be sure the creeps weren't back, and hell, for all I knew, maybe there was another weirdo lurking around who would torment me if they spotted me. I exited the park and ran down the block, made a right onto my street and quickly unlocked my door, went inside and quickly locked it. My dog started growling upstairs, but stopped once he saw me walking up the stairs into the living room. I looked to my right to see my mom passed out on the couch with the TV still on, as I had predicted before. I walked into my room and flopped onto my bed, exhausted both physically and emotionally. My dog must have noticed something was wrong and jumped onto my bed and proceeded to lick me and comfort me. I was so relieved that I had gotten away from those two guys, and I was never happier to be in the safety of my own home than I was at that moment. I always knew it was dangerous to walk home alone late at night, and I usually don't. But I had hoped that when I did, I would be okay. I was proven wrong that night. I quickly ran my dog outside and changed into a t-shirt and shorts once I got back inside. I was thinking in what-ifs the entire time, but eventually I got myself to stop thinking in what-ifs and accept that nothing happened, and to be thankful that I'll never have to know what would have happened. I managed to calm myself down, enough to fall asleep. I woke up close to noon later in the day, and I walked into the living room. I said hello to my parents, and my mom gets up and hugs me, and apologizes profusely for falling asleep when she was supposed to pick me up. She said she woke up around 5 in the morning and freaked out, that she had fallen asleep and that something bad might have happened to me. She rushed into my room to see myself sound asleep, and was relieved that I got home safe. I didn't say anything about what had happened on my walk home that night, as I knew it would devastate them to hear that they almost lost their son, and my mom would not be able to live with the guilt that she could have prevented the whole encounter if she had stayed awake to come pick me up. Up until this point, I actually haven't told anyone except for one very close friend of mine about this experience. I have no idea what those two guys' intentions with me were once I got into the car, but I know for a fact that they were not good, and I don't think I ever want to find out what they were. I'm just glad I'm safe, and after sharing this experience with you guys, I hope to move on from it and leave it in the past. So, two guys who chased me down to get me into their car that really should get their headlights fixed, let's not meet ever again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 243. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. That final story there reminds me of something that happened to me once. Not quite that severe, of course, but when I used to work in the place I'll refer to only as La Boca del Inferno, I usually walk to work, but I'd always get a lift home. I was a grown man. I was in my early 20s, but you know, your parents never really stopped worrying about you, so it was always insisted that I would always get picked up from work. I'd usually walk to, but occasionally I'd get driven and dropped off as well. But one night my father wasn't well, so I said, no, don't pick me up, you're not well, stay at home and rest. So I walked home, and I wasn't attacked, but I did get harassed by some strangers. I don't quite know what their motivation was, but that's what happened nonetheless. And so I came in the door and I was a little pissed, because these people had been annoying me. And my dad found out. It was like, right, that's it, he gets picked up no matter what from now on. And I did, and at least for the next few years, so that's what happened there. Okay, I think I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.